second time I press the record button, it actually records.
Oh, I see.
See, not the first time.
So what if I hit this button right here?
Okay, well...
Okay, so that's why.
That's
All right,
how
I understand.
Yes, we resume it by pressing it a second time.
So I should press it again.
Nathan.
Oh, wait.
One press makes the little halo glow red around the recording button.
Okay.
Second one, which it's fully glowing now, that means it actually is recording.
Right, but we just pressed it once.
Yes,
so we should press it the second time.
That suspended it, and then we resumed it, and now it's recording everything we say. And with much better quality and less distortion than the discount bin microphone that I got at Canute's Feed and Seed that we've been using for the first iterations of this podcast.
So you're saying this is also a microphone?
It has two microphones pointing at us now, that creating a neat stereo effect.
Right.
And let's begin then with thank you, Rob McLennan, for this amazing piece of equipment that you sent us for the podcast for Coddiwomple. It is an H4n Pro handy recorder. It actually says handy on it.
I thought it was a tricorder when I saw it.
It does look a bit like a tricorder, but with more buttons, I think, fewer flashing lights. But it's actually not that difficult to learn. Even I and my Luddite ass managed to figure it out before the software had finished downloading.
No. Hey, all right.
It took the software 2 hours, though, so it's
okay.
Not that impressive time on. But thank you, Rob, born landsman, Mr. Abel Cannon, and other anagrams as well, for single-handedly improving the quality of this podcast and ensuring that it continues, which people may curse you for in the months to come.
Or possibly the afterlife. I mean, I'm not dying anytime soon, to my knowledge.
I should hope not. We don't have that on our agenda of items to cover.
Oh, okay. We should maybe write it in for next week.
Where are you? Do you know when you're planning to die?
No, it's just something that, you should keep on your agenda just in case. I mean, in case America turns into America.
Have you worked out your own sort of Dr. Strangelove doomsday device?
Oh, like my bunker for the very end, like that kind of thing, with populated with 10% men and 90% women, that kind of thing that they do in the movie.
That's where they went when they were fearful of falling behind the mineshaft gap. I mean, more specifically, do you have a doomsday device that you have designed in order to take vengeance upon the world?
Should
you
this podcast?
This podcast is your vengeance.
Yes, because there will be people who listen to it,
trapped in their bunkers.
Yes, exactly.
Down below.
They'll be the only thing that exists after the bomb.
Even with a ratio of 10% men to 90% women, this will prevent the repopulation.
Absolutely.
Of the Earth.
My voice is fantastic at shutting off sexual desire.
Well, hello. Welcome to
Howdy.
Coddiwomple. You know who we are.
Or do you?
The meandering podcast where we talk about a few unrelated items in a general tread towards an interesting conversation.
Which we often arrive at.
I would like to point out at this point that there are no refunds.
At which we often arrive.
Yes. Neither did you pay anything for this, so...
Right. So take that.
Indeed. So, what do we get into now? Right. So, I had a nice, sort of a happy soul moment.
Yeah.
A few last month or so, and I need to take a step back to sort of frame this story a bit better. There is a spot in Tacoma called Freight House Square.
Yes.
That viewers of the live stream may know because it's where the new studio is. Mm-hmm. The Zombie Orpheus studio where they run Death from Above and Masters of the Metaverse, and where we did the final recording, I think, of the Journey Quest 3.5 live stream for the RPG with Perf and Nora.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yes, the days before Season 1 began. It is in this very long series of old buildings right up against the train tracks, Freight House Square. And it's been there, I don't know exactly how long. I first was there in high school in the early 90s for a little choir performance in the food court.
And it was probably old then.
It was old then. I don't think they've updated the asbestos since then. And it's a
Do
spot.
you update asbestos?
I don't know.
We'll come back.
Health codes and the like can be changed, but it still seems the same. You know, it's got that same sort of rusty undercarriage of a leaky ship ceiling thing going on over the open-topped restaurant bays.
Yeah, worn planks everywhere.
Worn planks everywhere. Yeah, it's an interesting spot, and it's kind of it gets unfair comparisons to Seattle's Pike Place Market.
It was never trying to be Pike Place.
It was
Market,
never trying to be.
think.
That's the thing, right? You know, Pike Place is this cultural icon, open market. It's been there for forever. It's one of the places where when there's a national sporting event, they send their camera crews to get B-roll footage.
Right. Yeah.
Get the Space Needle and get the dudes throwing the fish.
Yeah.
Which, if you are from the area, you know that's actually not something you want to do because it bruises the meat. They do that for tourists.
Yes.
Anyway, Freight House Square has nothing like that.
No.
There's been a lot of turnover in the stores, which it's not a very large facility. There's the food court's been there forever. There's a number of interesting and unique and eclectic little shops that seem to come and go.
Yeah.
A few of them have survived and made it out of the square and into their own spots, like a Crystal Voyage.
Oh yeah.
There, and there's but one place that's always been there, right at the end, is this gallery, art gallery of local and South Sound artists. And this is a place I liked to hang out, the square as well as the gallery itself. And there was one artist in particular whose work I really appreciated, named Dick Clifton, which I have a couple of his pieces right here. This is the first of his that I bought. Let me take it off the wall. I forget the name of it. That's it, the Fort Columbia Snag. And how to describe it is it's very stark. It's almost Zen-like in the colors that are used. It's done in silhouette. The medium is the serigraph, better known as the silk screen. And so like a big woodblock carving, there's a central piece and dark lines within it. This one we're looking at is like looking out over a single little tree that has grown out of a fallen log resting on the water's surface. In the background, across the horizon, you can see the sun or the moon, depending, and a very low hill across the water. And what the artist was able to do once he had this block was do multiple prints with different colored inks that could create the illusion of the same landscape at different times of day.
Oh.
And so what was really neat about this is I found this piece in a couple of others. There was one with some brilliant yellows and reds in the sky that looked like an early morning or a sunset. I found a copy for my brother that there was almost no blue at all. It was mostly white with interrupted little gaps in the sky and in the water, and it looked frigid, like this completely Arctic wintry morning. And I always enjoyed this type of artwork. It spoke to me. It's mostly Northwest scenes and whatnot. That salmon circle up there is the other piece. It was the first piece that caught my eye.
Oh.
And I've managed to purchase like a couple over the years because I didn't have the money to spend on art.
Right.
Anyway, one of the things I was really excited about when Zoe moved into the Freight House Square studio was, oh wow, we'll be able to swing by the gallery as often and maybe collect a few pieces. Went and discovered that the display was gone.
Oh.
As was that of many of the other artists I remembered. And
yeah, I know. I've seen displays there still because I went by a few weeks ago.
There are a few. There's a really nice work by an artist who does the rock designs. Using different pebbles to create shapes and peoples and silhouettes there. But the ones that I remember, Dick Clifton's silkscreen art and Val Persoon and her watercolors weren't there anymore, which was sad. I did some Google searching to try to find. Is there another gallery? Did it shut down? And I know that the artist has been dead for some time. He died in the 90s. There used to be a little write-up, not really a plaque, but a little poster that told us a bit about the artist. And he died in the 90s. And, he had worked for the Parks Department, and he was a Loot.
Oh, there you go.
Like we went to PLU, although it was Pacific Lutheran College at that time.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense. Yes, and that on the back of the prints, whatnot, in handwritten notes was the name of the gallery, which was Dick Clifton Art, run by his wife, Ann Clifton.
Oh, okay.
And so I wondered, oh no, did she pass? Did the family close it on down? Anyway, I couldn't find anything online for other places where the art was featured. I couldn't find, like a Google image search, found maybe a couple of pieces.
Okay.
You know, there's not widespread notoriety. Or anyway, there was a number on the back, handwritten, and I called it and got a robot voice, and not 2 hours later I got a call from Anne Clifton.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and she said that she'd closed down the gallery in January of 2018, but still had plenty of prints, and asked me, "Are you from the region?" Turns out she's just down in Olympia.
Oh wow.
Where my folks live as well.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'm very much interested in getting a couple more pieces or seeing what was there available. And so she basically proposed, why don't we meet at your parents' house?
Oh wow.
Which is like, makes sense. She doesn't know me. Doesn't know if I'm crazy or the ways that I am.
Right.
And
so
anyway,
unless the whole family's crazy.
Exactly. So we met, and she brought a ton of these old prints, and was able to add a few to my collection,
That's
which was
nice.
really nice. And I'm definitely plan to do more when I can afford to. I don't have them framed or anything yet, just getting the pieces. But sitting down for coffee, she told me a bit about the artist and how he worked, and that he would go to these places and sketch out what he would do later in his studio for creating the silk screens, and that the process involved multiple layers of putting the ink, put one of the screens down, and then basically squeegee the heck out of it with the ink to get the print, and then put the next layer on. And some of these had, over a dozen colors and layers to them.
Oh, okay.
Some of the larger pieces and whatnot. And she also told me, and I didn't ask about this, but just kind of brought it up, that this is what indirectly, well, no, not indirectly, that led to his death.
Oh, no.
Was basically the paints poisoned him.
Oh.
And he died at 57.
Oh.
And had the ability, like, he could have used water-based paints instead, whatnot, but he said he wouldn't be able to get the same colors that way. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, suffering for your art, like literally.
Reminds me of the God, I think it was yellow. I think it was like an old yellow used in a lot of old paintings that had actual radioactive elements in it.
Cadmium yellow?
Yeah, I think that's probably what I'm thinking
Bob
of.
Bob Ross is one of the colors that he uses on his palette.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that, I mean, I assume that it didn't actually have cadmium in it anymore, but originally.
Well, yeah, no, yeah. I think that was it. I remember reading about it, and of course I don't remember the details because that's what a smart person would do. But no, just that a lot of older paintings have like a radioactive signature, very faint at this point, but because there were actual radioactive elements that they used to make those colors.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it sounds like Dick Clifton had a better idea that maybe these paints were a little more dangerous than probably the folks who originally threw radioactive elements on their paintings.
May have.
But yeah.
I'm interested in learning more about him and adding pieces to the wall here.
I'm always fascinated by people who are willing to throw so much into their art.
Right.
Yeah.
See you looking. I have a few other pieces here. I've thought about maybe adding pictures from them here. This one's a Clifton, this very Zen-like one.
Yeah. With
the trees and the red sunset. This is a piece, it looks like it's regional Aboriginal art. I don't know. It's just, it hung in my parents' house forever, and so it's a connection to childhood. That one's self-explanatory.
Right.
I have this piece above the Fort Columbia snag here that is a black and white typewriter with, in Cyrillic letters, on the sheet of paper is written autobiography.
Oh, okay.
And it's one that my father bought for me back when he and my mom were teaching abroad in Istanbul.
Oh, wow.
And look at the keys.
Yeah.
They're spikes.
I've seen that before.
Yeah. Painful. And this one I found, so I have a framed black and white, it's a picture of, looks like it's a charcoal drawn picture of the Narrows Bridge, which connects Tacoma to Gig Harbor and the Kitsap Peninsula. And it says the City of Destiny, Tacoma's Fine Arts Magazine. And I found it in the Tacoma Book Center. This is Tacoma's, it's the largest bookstore in the state. It's got 250,000 books, mostly used. It's right next to Freight House Square, actually, in Tacoma.
Yeah,
and
I've been there multiple times.
Yeah, same. I picked that place over. And it's been fun going back and actually seeing the some of the books that I sold to them in order to get store credit.
To get other books.
But I still have my embossment, signature in some of them. And some of them I bought back because I was ready to read them again. Anyway,
fun.
I found this magazine for $10 in the back of the local section.
Huh.
And it's glossy, and you can, based on the yellowing of the pages and the gloss of the pages and even the lettering on the front, it was like, this seems like many, many decades old.
Yeah, well, and it says price 35 cents, so
Yes.
that definitely...
But I couldn't find a date. There was not a date in the magazine.
I don't see it.
In the table of contents or anything. So I leafed through it trying to find where is...
Some contemporaneous
Exactly.
events.
Give me something that tells me when this was printed. And in the very back, in the community calendar, was a section that said this so-and-so reading group would not be meeting as normal and would resume in February 1939.
Huh, wow.
Which means that is Galloping Gertie. That's the original bridge before it went down.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have to be.
Yeah. So
that's fun.
Well, someday I'll take that off the wall and actually read it, but for the time being, it's a neat story behind it. So, what are you working on these days? Is there anything you'd like to promote? We're at that section of the meandering conversation.
Meandering to specific points.
Yes.
Right now, I am working on being at work. So I'd been let go of my job later last year, and about a month and a half ago, I think either a little bit before we did... No, I think it was just a little after we did our last podcast.
So that would be March. Yeah, mid-March.
Yeah, would have been, probably around maybe a week after that.
Okay.
I ended up getting a couple of gigs with this company that does contract work for some of the bigger tech companies in the area. So the first one was just kind of a placeholder job to get to the one I'm in now, where I basically run participants through a study.
You're a DM.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's about right. But the thing about it is it's in Redmond, 5 days a week, and starts at 8:30 and ends somewhere between 6 and 8:30, just because it's been going kind of late.
Yeah.
So I'm spending somewhere between 11 to 15 hours a day away from home, which, because there is an end date, is okay. It's a 5-week study.
Sure.
I have an end date. I was like, okay, since I don't have anything lined up before this, I can buckle down and just work as many hours as humanly reasonable. And then once that's done, I might actually have some money to carry me through till I get something else. But for right now, it means I don't really have time to do anything else.
For those of you who aren't familiar with the Puget Sound, Redmond is about 40 miles northeast of Tacoma, but you've got to go through a couple of the worst traffic interchanges in the region and the country to get there.
Yeah. So the 40-mile journey takes about somewhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on traffic. If there's no traffic, if I stay past 8, it's an hour journey, no problem.
Sure,
it's not that bad.
When I commute to the university, it's that way. I go during non-peak rush hours, and it still can take me an hour to get there.
Now, on that note, what days do you go to your job up there?
This semester, we just entered the summer semester, I'm teaching Mondays and Fridays.
Okay. I ask because I'm not sure I can always take time off at lunch. I pretty much just work through lunch. But if I do get a little time, I'm about 4 blocks away from your work.
Well, the earliest I start is 4 p.m.
Oh, all right.
I teach mostly evening classes, which is how I'm able to avoid the traffic.
Yeah, there you go.
I go up in
because at 4 o'clock you're going against the grain, and oh, then you might actually be around someday when I get off work, and maybe we'll do some dinner.
Yeah. I also have structured it such that the office hours, which I'm required to keep 2 office hours per section of the class that I teach, and so since I teach mostly night classes, I stack most of my office hours at 8 p.m. and beyond.
Okay.
And to this date, I've not had a single student visit me in office hours. And my wife doesn't listen to this, so it's a way to give myself some quiet reading time in a room on the 3rd floor, adjunct office. No one else is there. There's no children running in to try to climb on me and ask what I'm doing and then talk about what I'm doing while I'm doing it and trying to read. Not that happens.
No, it's never happened.
Fresh memory. Well, I'm glad to hear that it's got an endpoint.
Yeah. I don't think I would have taken it if there hadn't been an endpoint. I just said to myself, hey, it's going to be most of your time for, a 5-week period, and then when that's done, you will actually have some money, and hey, hopefully that will carry you till you have something a little more permanent and a little closer to home.
Hooray for the gig economy.
Yay, gig. So yeah, that's what I am working on. Every now and again at work there is a temporary half hour where it's slow, and I will do some writing for some of the Dungeons and Flagons episodes I'm working on. For those of you who were not listening on our last episode, Dungeons and Flagons is a internet web series of me just talking about role-playing games that I am currently...
internet web series.
Yes, turns out you don't have those web series somewhere besides the internet, like, say, the sewer web series. Because you can tune into the sewer to watch... Alright, look, I am not interested in your bullshit, Matt. Alright? I get enough mockery on a daily basis from myself.
I can see the point.
Alright. I feel like I've really thrown my weight around here.
Your internet web series.
Yes. They're not redundant in any way.
Can I see that online?
Not yet. Okay. Well, what are you working on, Matt?
Well, still chugging along. We just had the semester change,
right?
Which is nice.
Okay.
Where we go from the institute, I guess I should call it, but that sounds really ominous. So the institute needs more of my time. University's on a 3-semester-a-year schedule with 4-month semesters in the fall and spring, and a 3-month compressed semester in the summer when they bring over students from the Singapore campus, and I think some from the Barcelona campus for classes that aren't offered at the satellite campuses overseas.
Right.
And so that's what I'm teaching now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's neat. As far as work, I'm still working on the Farther All World Bible, the Farther All Companion.
Right.
I'm into the heftiest section right now, which is history.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the pre-write outlining phase of that. I just finished the 4th age.
Oh, nice.
Which is, of course, the time of Journey Quest, and I'm
cool.
working now into the 5th age, which is the time of the Gamers movies.
Cool.
And I'm running up against how do I effectively summarize world-shaking events without giving away spoilers for what we have in the hopper.
Yeah.
So it's trying to be vague.
I guess we better make those really soon.
You really should. I can put a disclaimer at the beginning of look, I'm not going to spoil the damn series to, write it encyclopedia style.
Right.
Here.
We'll make it a supplement that you can add on to your Kickstarter donation for the last Gamers movie.
Speaking of which, we are getting ready for the next big Kickstarter, the Journey Quest 4, which, if you've been following along in the Discord channel, is going to be, I think it launches on the 28th of May, so right after Memorial Day. Yeah. It's going to run the maximum 60 days.
Right on.
A lot of cool rewards in it, and one of the things I'm working on is, two that are cool. One I probably should have reconsidered before committing to it. But one of them is we're going to be adding a new language this time around.
Oh, boy.
We're adding Elvish, yep.
All right.
And I'm working with a fellow linguist by the name of Tom McAllister, who's helping me with putting in the phonemes and building the basic vocabulary. Because having gone through this before, one, you think I would have learned my lesson. But
I didn't think you would have learned your lesson.
2, it's one thing to make it to just come up with a bunch of words. It's another to make it actually have a syntax that changes and is appropriate, and you can actually get meaning out of by arrangement of the words. And so I'm working on the syntax and the grammar, and Tom's working on the basic vocabulary, because you need basically 200-300 words, not just the stuff that I need translated for seasons 4 and 5, but what are the most common words in your language? Father, mother, come, run, walk, food, eat, other, just words that you might not think of as the popular ones because they're ubiquitous, that I need out there, and have those down so you can actually start building some sentences and such. And so there's that. Another one I probably should have, the one I kind of kicking myself for, but it's going to be fun, is there's a reward where it's basically I'm going to dress up as the Oracle and you can ask me 3 questions. And I'll be snarky and deceptive, of course.
Right.
as I assume people would want me to be. As far as workload right now, it's kind of like, I've likened it to, I remember this time my brother Jeff and I took a road trip to the Oregon coast, and we came to the Dunes Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, which big, gorgeous sand dunes. But this is in many places it has vertical sections of the park as you're coming down the cliffs.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we went there and did the dune buggies. Like, they have sections where you can just rent dune buggies and tool around.
And it's gorgeous. There's places where the sand is flat and packed, and you're not even leaving footprints. And then there's places like on the divots on the cliffside where it pools, and you can you take a step and you go down to your ankle in this powder fine sand. Anyway, we got out at one of the viewpoints up on the top of the cliff and climbed over the railing like you're not supposed to, and went down the cliff that way and ran down it. And this was about a 45-degree angle. And as I'm going, I'm picking up speed, and it feels awesome, right? I feel like I'm flying. I'm soaring down this thing, bam, 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 going up to my to mid calf with each step.
Oh, wow.
It's exhilarating. I'm picking up speed, and I'm great. And then I realize I have reached my maximum speed, and I'm still accelerating. And if I pull back in any way or fail to sprint, I will face plant and roll. That's what the workload feels like kind of right now. It's fun and I'm enjoying it, but if I trip, I am going to wipe out spectacularly. Spectacular amount of wiping out there.
All right, well, I wish you luck in putting one foot in front of the other in a rapid fashion.
I appreciate that. What are you reading these days?
Well, given the enormous amount of time that I am doing things that are not having time to do other things, I'm reading a lot of podcasts. Since I'm in the car for usually at least 2.5, maybe 3 hours a day, I've downloaded a whole bunch of podcasts that I'm listening to. I'm doing mostly NPR stuff, Radio Lab and Wait, Don't Tell Me. Just because Radio Lab I really enjoy because it's just so eclectic. Yeah. It's just crazy little things, and I learned stuff that's fun. Like one of the most recent episodes was about these during World War II, these paper parachute basically bombs that Japan sent over that almost no one knows about. And what it was these series of light metal rings with these small bombs hung on them. And it was after they were trying to figure out how do we bomb the United States? How do we get over there and bomb them? And at the time, they had done more research than we had and knew more about the jet streams, the air currents in the upper atmosphere. And so what they did was they made these basically they had a bunch of grade school students put together these paper parachutes, basically. These balloons that were basically paper, and then they filled them with a certain amount of hot air. And they basically rigged this this contraption that would basically turn into a hot air balloon. And then they put it on an air current in a high mountain in Japan and let it go. And the idea was it would float all the way across the Atlantic and land in the United States.
Wow.
And some of them actually made it to the United States shore. Now, of all the instances, they mostly blew up harmlessly. There were one time 6 or 7 people were killed. But that was the only time it actually, but there were reports for quite a few months of these things someone's I saw this white thing flying through the sky and then something exploded, in the distance, And what they did was they figured okay, as they're going up in the upper atmosphere, the air in the balloon will cool, which will cause it to drop a little bit. And so as it does that, they had a series of weights on the bottom, and it was rigged so that once it got below a certain altitude, it would start dropping the weights.
Wow.
And then after time, instead of dropping weights, it was supposed to start dropping the little bombs on it. Because they were by about that time, it should probably be around the United States, and so there will be these bombs that just show up out of nowhere and blow up, and they won't be able to figure out where they came from. We'll sow terror in the United States, and it's not something we're going to detect with radar. So it was just this fascinating thing about this super low-tech solution to getting bombs like all the way across, or not the Atlantic, the Pacific Ocean.
So,
I said
but I mean,
Atlantic earlier.
but the calculations that would have been
Right.
required
Yeah.
for that solution, and these hit mainland U.S., not just Alaska.
No, yeah, yeah. The folks who were killed were in Oregon, and there were reports of people like I think I remember hearing one like all the way over in Colorado,
Holy
or
crap.
yeah, like just stuff. You're like, that is incredible. Like it's a very small. Like they figured out how many they sent, and I can't remember how many it was, but a very small percentage made it to the U.S. But they figure that they figure most of them either detonated in remote areas or fell into the ocean before they ever got here. But there are possibly a percentage of them that are still out there and active.
Sort of like
Somewhere.
the buried munitions in France, but
Yeah.
not still up there.
No, not still up there.
Okay.
They all would have landed by this time, but it's possible that there are some active, or possibly at this point, maybe they aren't going to explode anymore, but they could be live munitions just lying around that were sent over from Japan in World War II. So that's the kind of thing I enjoy.
I won't be
finding out about.
I won't be running down the Oregon dunes anymore.
Yeah, no. If you see like a very old, decayed, white, probably paperish looking parachute around a metal ring with some stuff hanging off of it, don't go exploring.
I will not go exploring.
So I'm saving lives here for those of you who will be finding 70-year-old Japanese bombs, 75-year-old Japanese bombs. Anyway.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Public safety.
Public safety. So that's what I'm reading.
That's what you're reading. Very nice. I just finished a book called Silence in the Age of Noise by a Norwegian author named Erling Kage.
Okay, I just find that funny because Norwegian stoicism.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. It's a whole Scandinavian stoicism thing. Well, it's cold up there. You don't open your mouth.
I guess that's a good point.
Anyway, there have been a handful of books that when I've read them, I've felt just sort of a profound impact from them, an immediate, like changing of behavior or adoption of some new habits that were suggested or outlined in the book, or it's one that I know that I will be reading again at different stages in my life as I reach different levels of insight and experience. And this was one, an immediate. And it's not a long book as far as word count, but it is one of those books that you can't really read it quickly because it needs to be digested and savored. So who this fellow is he is a Norwegian publisher and mountaineer, explorer, you might say. He's the first person to make it to the South Pole by themselves.
Oh, wow.
Like he hauling a sledge with all of his food and his camp stove and his tent and all what he needed, and dragging it to the South Pole where he was met by people who were going to fly him back, I assume.
Okay, yeah.
And apparently the insurance wouldn't, in order to let him go alone, required him to take a radio. And he did take the radio, but he left the batteries in the plane.
Huh.
And didn't speak to anyone for 51 days on this trip. And it's not the only one of those he's made. He's visited the three poles, as they're called: the North Pole, the South Pole, and the summit of Everest.
Oh, okay.
And what this book is about is meditations and discussions on the nature of silence. Silence not as the absence of sound, but as like the corollary to it. A place that is next to mysticism and nature and God in its way. And it reads very much, it's interesting because it's listed as self-help, but it's much closer to philosophy. And it reminded me much of the Tao in how it was structured, in the brevity of its chapters, and the fact that the chapters don't really unfold in a progression. You know, you don't have to have read the third chapter to understand the fourth. They're all different conversations on the topic of silence and our relationship to it and why we're uncomfortable with it. And it really sort of made me notice how we are so uncomfortable with silence that we fill it with as much noise and music as we possibly can. And I'm more keenly aware of it now because, again, 2 young children.
Right.
And since I've read this, I've stopped. I don't have the radio on in the car anymore. You know, I don't run with with the music anymore, or headphones or anything. I just run, and it's helped with the meditation as well. And it reads very much like the Tao, in that each one of these is something you reread, and you're not sure if you quite get it until you've read it a few times. But it's if we do consider it a book of philosophy, it's the only one I've ever read that references Depeche Mode.
Huh.
Enjoy the Silence.
Interesting.
I highly recommend it. I wasn't looking for it when I found it, and I look forward to reading it again.
That sounds pretty cool.
I agree. So what are you watching? And have you watched enough of it that we can talk about it?
Yes. So in the time I have on weekends, or like sometimes the time I have to get home and watch one episode of something, I have caught up on Game of Thrones.
Yes.
So, and I understand it's just one more episode, right?
One more episode, yes.
So, not giving away spoilers, I am not sure how I feel about the events of the last episode. The events of the next episode will determine how I feel about them.
That has been one of the things I've kind of been biting my tongue on, because I don't like to discuss stuff like this in the public sphere. But it seems premature to be judging an episode when the final reel of the film hasn't played yet.
Right? Yeah. Now, I'm worried about some of the decisions made.
Sure.
But there's also the part of me that's now a little more curious about what's going to come out if/when the books are finished.
Yeah.
Because I know there's some very important points of departure. Like, so I can probably mention this without giving it away if you haven't read the books, because this won't be a thing that's given away if you haven't read the books, because you won't understand what I'm talking about until you get to this part in the books. And that's the character of Stoneheart. Like, that's a pretty large departure from where the show went. And some of the events surrounding that character's interactions that we don't exactly know where they go, but there are a couple key characters that Stoneheart has interactions with, and we don't exactly know what happens to them, that are kind of at the very end of the fourth and the fifth books. And so I'm interested, like, how does that change the story? Does it change it at all? It obviously changes some other parts, because there are other characters who will not be going forward in the story in the books because of this character. So, yeah, it just...
that's a euphemistic way of putting that.
Well, one of them wasn't because Stoneheart did anything to them. At least. So, and we'll talk about that in detail privately later.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm just sort of interested, like, where are the differences? The events of the most recent episode, was that something that was planned for the books, or is that one of the directions that the show creators decided to take it in?
Personally, it's been so long since I've read the books. Like, I remember resisting. Ben got me a copy of Game of Thrones for my birthday when I was still in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I said, I really don't want to read this right now. I want to wait till the story is out. He says, you have to read this because I read it, and you have to suffer as I have. And there were only the 3 books out at that time. Yeah. And I just devoured them in probably within a month, and then had to go on the long waiting for the next few books. Which we're all on. And there's been 2 books since 2000.
Yeah.
And
and the first one was in 97.
96. It was 96, 98, 2000. 2005, I think it was, and then 2011.
Yeah.
And
that was 7 years on.
And I've the detail decay has happened so much that watching the series was a nice way to just sort of remember all of that such. Jeremy Spray put it, as he put it, the departure from the books actually lets the show be just a show.
Yeah.
And I thought that's been good. I've appreciated that.
Yeah.
Even in places where maybe the pacing has suffered as a consequence. I think maybe eventually I will go back and reread the books. But if the series is satisfying, which I really hope it is when it concludes.
Me too.
I don't know that I'm going to need to read the other books when they come out, or that I would have to reread from the beginning of the series in order to give it a fair shake. Of the events of the last episode, personally, I did not think they were out of character. I think the foreshadowing has been there. I think, if anything, it's a matter of the pacing.
Yeah, I think, like, looking back, I was like, they kind of went in that direction, but I think either they didn't lean hard enough in it to get us like ready that could happen, or they didn't start the lean early enough for that arc to make sense.
Yeah.
Because there's some previous things that happened with or that the character performed that we're all talking about that were so far away from the actions in this episode, like so dramatically far away that I don't know. I guess I didn't feel like I was pulled far enough in that direction to buy it. Like maybe 2 more episodes of going a little harder in that direction and I would have been there. But I don't think they got me there by this episode. See what happens in the next episode and just kind of determine.
Again, the story's not done yet.
Right.
We can determine after it. The thing that struck me afterwards, and partly is it because I'm teaching story structure over and over again, is so many of the character arcs in this show and series are tragedies.
Yeah.
Like in the actual dramatic sense of a tragedy. Someone who fails because of their own irreconcilable character flaws.
Right.
Right. I don't think it's a spoiler at this point to say that Ned Stark dies, right?
I don't think so. If you are not following Game of Thrones and we're just now starting, for some reason we apologize, but if either you don't care about Game of Thrones or you've devoured most of it at this point, so I think that's safe.
Look at how many of the character arcs ended because they're of the irreconcilable flaws of those characters. Ned's sense of honor.
Yeah.
Oberyn's need for revenge. There were some others that were very obvious. Jaime's relationship with his lover. It's like all of these, and tragedies are not something we in the West are really comfortable with, particularly America. We like black and white morality, where the good guy always wins. Or even if they die, they get a moral victory, like Maximus at the end of Gladiator, or William Wallace at the end of Braveheart. I die, but I actually win by dying. Right? We don't like failure arcs.
Yeah.
We don't like the arcs where we look back and we say, we don't like the morality play of you like this character and they failed. What can you learn about it? I don't want to think about my entertainment.
Right.
I want to escape with my entertainment.
Yeah.
Right. And this was in keeping with that same pattern, I believed. Of tragedy.
Of tragedy, of hubris, of
succumbing to your own inherent character flaws rather than overcoming them and transforming into something better at the end.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely see that. I guess I just feel like the character flaw was starting to really be prominent, but wasn't prominent enough for me to go... Like it felt like it took like a giant leap forward.
Had they been given enough time, or maybe had they accepted enough of a runway, maybe done 10 episodes rather than 6, I think it probably could have gotten there. But
even 7 or 8. At
the same time, the show lives and dies on there was another point. It lives and dies on its ability to shock us. And if they let us see it coming, if they let the audience anticipate it too much, then it loses its shock value. Because at the same time that audiences want to be right about where a storyline is going, if a storyline or even a scene resolves the way that they expect it to, part of them is going to be bored.
Right.
And it's this weird give and take, right? I want you to fool me. I want you to fool me but at the same time I want to be right. And if that happens too much that I'm right, you tell your audience that you can start ignoring the plot points. You're giving them the ability to skip the material or to phase out. Someone wrote, I forget in the review, but they said that it's better to make your audience angry than bored because they'll keep reading if they're angry. If they're bored, they'll stop. They'll stop watching your show if you're bored, but they'll still hate watch it if they're still angry. And the other point was, what was it? Come on, Matt, I had it. It wasn't about the tragedy. It wasn't about the shock. It was something else structural. And I've forgotten it. I should have written it down. Yeah, well, must not be that critical.
Okay.
If I remember, I'll come back to it.
We'll grab it when we discuss the end of the series next month.
What else? Are you watching anything else?
Because we have the HBO subscription, we also started watching Westworld.
We watched the first season of that.
We're finishing. We're like halfway through the first season. It's really fascinating so far. Yeah, there's definitely a what's really going on that I think for so many series is really pivotal. Like if you're doing I mean, like you said, you want to fool the audience, but you also want them to try and guess. Like there's a mystery and you don't know what it is, but we're giving you little clues as part of the engagement to I'm trying to figure it out. Like I'm making an active effort to guess what happens. And there are going to be times where I get it and times where I don't. And so but yeah, just the trying to figure out exactly what's going on below the surface. It's just so complex. And the things they're doing with the questions of like consciousness and sapience and autonomy and
it's a show that's inviting you to discuss and to think about the questions raised by its very theme, by the armature of the series. We thought it was magnificent in the first season, and then we immediately went into the second season, and I don't know if it was a matter of us starting it immediately after finishing the first one, or going from having the ability to binge it to having to wait a week at a time, but it felt like it hit a sophomore slump, or that it was treading water for a bit. I'd like to come back and rewatch it, but after the first season, we started getting caught up on Game of Thrones again, in preparation for the final season there. Right. So that would be something that we could go to. I remember now the other point about Game of Thrones. One thing that struck me about the series since the reading of the books is how Martin and D&D later do nothing for, or have historically done nothing for, narrative convenience. The sort of tropes you would expect from high fantasy fiction don't happen. Like, I remember reading, again, I've already referenced it, but the death of Ned Stark, I was shocked.
Yeah.
Like, wait, no, this guy's a protagonist.
Yeah.
I'm reading the scenes, getting excited. It's like, okay, how does this happen? Who frees him? Does he grab a sword? Does he free himself? Do the Northmen come out of here? Does Arya do something to distraction? And then it's with a whimper that he goes out. And it's this unfitting end for the hero, but it feels historically accurate. Yeah. Like that would actually happen in a world not driven by narrative plot points. And we see that repeated in other places. Like what blunts the North's war against the Lannisters. Right. And certain characters dying off screen, not in noble and climactic ways. We have there's this obligatory scene that often we expect in a movie. Oh, the protagonist and the antagonist are going to meet and fight. Yes. We've been promised this since the beginning. And then to subvert that, while that is more likely what would happen in an actual historical context, feels so strange and foreign, but at the same time it's always made it feel more realistic to me. And as far as realistic as you can be with dragons and exploding stone. Right. I do like the nature of the concussive, explosive fire, though. That's pretty cool. Yeah. I remember seeing that and being like, so there's actual force behind it. And I mean, in the animation of the dragons, you can see, like, on either side of their mouth, there's these little holes, which presumably is where they shoot either the actual fire or, like, whatever chemicals mix as it's blasted out of its mouth. So I'm curious, like, is that something that just blasts out of their face with so much force, or is it something about the nature of the mixing of the chemicals that causes an explosion, or is it just magic? Just one of those things. One of those things.
But to your point, I remember the first time I read The Death of Eddard, because they don't specifically said, and the sword went through his neck and his head fell off. Like, I was like, wait, so is there something like this is a trick? Like, we're supposed to think he's dead, and then he isn't?
It was from Arya's POV, right?
Yeah,
she lost sight of it.
Yeah, because then Yoren, covers her up and is like, don't look, and then, like, I think it's either the next chapter or the one after that, because I'm like, okay, where's the thing where it turns out he's really alive? Yeah, right. And then I was like, and then, like, Joffrey's, like, saying, like, hey, Sansa, look at your dad's head. And I'm like, I guess that really did happen. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Yep, so that's a real thing, then. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm not one of the people who thinks that the show has gone off the rails. I wish that there had been a little more time to pace it out a bit, but I am overall really happy with how the show's been going. Okay. And I think it's been good for fantasy in general.
For sure it has.
And fantasy fiction. With all the shows that are in development now and that may be coming out in the near years. So, yes. I'm also still watching Deep Space Nine.
Awesome. Still love DS9.
I'm halfway through. I'm near the end of the 4th season, which is when we start to see not original Sisko, but classic Sisko. The goatee comes out, the hair goes back. And I guess watching it now, being able to binge watch it, I could actually see Avery Brooks's hairline go back before they decided to shave his head, which I didn't in the original.
Or he did.
Week to
Who
week,
knows,
or he did. Who knows? But it's really turning out good. I love how the world is. It's the dirty side of Star Trek.
Yes.
Nothing works. They fail over and over again. Crappy stuff happens that they can't
do anything about.
That they're powerless to prevent.
They just have to deal with it for either forever or for at least quite a while before they can do anything about it.
I've really been enjoying, because it's the season where Worf comes and joins.
Oh yeah.
And they actually reference, and it's in keeping with the tone of the show, they reference the destruction of the Enterprise in Star Trek Generations.
Yeah.
There. That, Worf is looking at the Enterprise as a thing of his past at this point, you know? And for a guy used to operating on the flagship of the Federation with people who were just paragons.
Yeah, virtue, yeah.
And now he's in a situation where you have thieves and criminals walking around in broad daylight in the promenade, and the security guy basically like, yep, kind of got to let it happen if I'm going to catch him in the act.
Yeah.
It's I've always appreciated that other realistic, gritty side of the Star Trek universe. And I love Captain Sisko and the decisions that he makes, and that he is a fighter, and that you don't always have the ability to rely on deep moral principles and diplomacy the way that Picard does.
Right.
Sisko will make that offer a couple of times, and then he's like, okay, we're fighting, and he'll kick your ass.
You didn't say, I gave you a chance, dude. Now you're done.
Exactly.
And I mean, I think he's got a really good foil, also consistent through the series, in Gul Dukat.
Yes.
Who's this, has this veneer of diplomacy, and look, we're just, we're opponents, but we respect each other. And Sisko's like, fuck you, dude. You're an asshole. I don't respect anything about you.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to how it ramps up when it goes almost serialized in the last few seasons as the War with the Dominion picks up.
Yeah. Have you hit the episode where the Klingon fleet is hovered over DS9?
There was the one where he was in the mirror universe when that happened, where Smiley had stolen the schematics to the Defiant, and they couldn't get it to work over there because it was so overpowered, and so they kidnap Sisko, bringing him over by using not recruiting, she was already part of the group, but by sending his mirror universe wife over to basically get Jake to fall in love with his missing mom, and go back with him to lure Sisko in to fight the Klingons, and they wind up losing her at the end of that episode again. And it's Star Trek and Next Generation would often on these downer episodes they'd end on a glimmer of hope or whatnot. Like even the episode I think where Tasha Yar was killed, it had the bit where Data has the holoprojector of her. It's like she's remembered in here, so there's a glimmer of hope. No, this was the final shot of a big overhead shot of grieving father and son having lost their mother and wife again.
Yeah.
Episode.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, damn, DS9. And this was the mid-90s.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was definitely...
This was before gritty TV.
I think one of the aspects I appreciate about DS9 is one of the things that I sometimes have trouble articulating about why I like the original trilogy of Star Wars, is that they were in this dirty, broken down universe. The only thing that was orderly was this unfeeling, antiseptic, overarching organization, the Empire. That's the only thing that wasn't broken down and dirty, and there was the only thing that had rules, and they were terrible rules. And I think when you go back to the prequel trilogy, suddenly everything's shiny and somehow better than in the original series. And I mean, I can give some allowance to the Galactic Republic was up and operating then, but even then we're really, no one had an old ship. Everyone's crap was brand new and shiny, and so that's I think there's a place in science fiction for, and I think that even makes science fiction better overall for not just everything is utopian and great because we have great technology, but it's going to solve some problems, but you're still going to have human nature. People are still going to try and kill, cheat each other, get the upper hand. Like, it's just going to change how that occurs.
I've thought, and I don't believe it was constructed this way, but if you look at the three Star Wars trilogies in their, not in the order that they were released, but in their chronological order, it kind of mirrors different phases of life. Like, there's the childhood of the first three. Everything's bright and shiny and exciting and colorful and the like, even the dark stuff. And then the middle, you have that sort of early adulthood where you're kind of wandering and I don't know what's right. I'm trying to find myself in the universe. And then this last trilogy is sort of the grizzled adult, make way for the new generation.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't know. I haven't put much analysis into it because I have Deep Space Nine to watch.
Right. Much more important.
What are you playing?
I'm playing Go to Work every day. At least until this gig is over.
I hate that game.
Yeah, no, it's a terrible game. Every now and then, like, I'll find some time to get in an L5R game or two, but for the most part, I'm playing Go to Work every day.
Now, how? So it's Fantasy Flight is doing an L5R now, and
Yes.
they're on the Legacy card game. Is that how they or Living card game? Is that
Yes,
what they call
living
it?
card game model.
Now, how do they handle expansions and such?
So they had, like, they've been kind of toying with it a little, and now they've kind of settled on what they're doing.
Okay.
But it was basically like a lot of their other living card games, like you buy a base set, or in their case, 3 base sets, because
So you have a full play set
right,
of everything.
because they want you to at least invest some money up front. But then after that, for the most part, they release 1 pack of cards every month, and you spend $15 and you get a full play set of everything that they release that month, and then the next month $15 more, but you get a full play set of everything.
What are the themes of the monthly releases?
They go in cycles. So the first one was the Imperial cycle. So it was a lot having to do with just sort of the nature of the empire of Rokugan. Both the courts and light people have to do with some of the more military stuff. The next one was the Elemental cycle. It focused a lot on like Shugenja and like different ways to interact with the 5 rings. And the one that's about to start is the Inheritance cycle. The story of the emperor passing away and the empire being inherited by his second son, maybe.
So this is how are you? Well, backstep a bit for those of you who weren't familiar with L5R. It's one of the first collectible card games that came out after Magic blew the doors off and made it a new industry. And it was always in like the top 3 or 5 most popular games. And what really attracted people to it, myself especially, was it had a progressing storyline that where choices were based on player interaction, victory in tournaments, player movements and whatnot, play styles and such. And so you had characters whose people started to love and whose fate sometimes fell in their hands. And also you had these different clans and factions that you had to choose. Like Magic has, the 5 colors and multicolor, but
no one's like, I'm only a blue player.
I'm only going to play green. Whereas in the clans, it's like, I am Crab till I die. Crab clan, Hida.
Right. And maybe I'll play some other decks, but if it's a tournament and it matters, I'm playing my
I'm wearing
clan.
my team colors. And so people, really identified with those factions. And there were 20 years of storyline that evolved over that. But then when AEG sold the property to Fantasy Flight, they went back to the beginning of the story.
Right. And started telling it again with the option for different things to happen this time.
And that to me was also, just having moved on and not really wanting to learn another playset again, was one of the things that kind of nixed my interest in it, was the erasure of, as I see it, the erasure of 20 years of fan input. For someone who was even more involved in the game than I was, how have you found the new storyline and just that whole aspect of it, having to, it can't not be compared to what came before.
No, you can't avoid that. It's interesting because they are doing some things differently, partially just because they have to, because some story choices changed.
Sure.
Like in the original In the original storyline, the old Emerald Champion had just died, like kind of right before the beginning of the storyline. The Crane Clan champion Doji Satsume, and then the next Emerald Champion.
Was this right after the Scorpion Clan coup?
Right, because the Scorpion Clan coup was kind of a like they had the beginning of the storyline, and then they were like, oh yeah, by the way, there was the Scorpion Clan coup, because they added the Scorpion Clan later.
That's because they weren't one of the original 6.
Right, so they kind of retconned and were like, hey, there's this other clan that got banished, but now they're coming back.
Yes, got it.
And so yeah, that Emerald Champion, the Emerald Champion was basically like the lead general / law keeper. Yeah, sort of like the president and a chief justice all in one, but still had to obey the emperor.
Yes.
And so he had died, and so they had to choose a new Emerald Champion. In the old storyline, the next champion was also from the Crane Clan. He was the dueling master Kikita Toshimoko.
Yep, the Great Crane.
Right. In the new one, the new Emerald Champion is Akoto Toturi, who in the old story was a dishonored member of the Lion Clan, who was also like this, basically a Thunder, which was a mystical hero destined to overthrow this evil god.
And he was the one who in the old storyline became the
new emperor after the current emperors died.
And the evil god Fu Lang inhabited the body of that emperor.
And was killed.
And different clans all fought. This was one of those major storyline decisions.
Yes.
Who won the Gen Con World Championship in that year? Whatever faction that player was playing, their Thunder would
kill Fu Lang, be the one who delivered the killing stroke, and become emperor.
Yeah. So so now Toturi is
now Toturi, instead of being this dishonored samurai who, regardless, pulls together this giant army of people to help fight Fu Lang, and then eventually everyone recognizes him as the honorable samurai he always was, and he becomes emperor. Now he's the Emerald Champion instead. And in this version, the emperor is sort of saying his oldest son, who in the old storyline was possessed by the evil god Fu Lang and became the evil god incarnate on Earth as the emperor, he's noticing like he's got a mean streak. So he tells Toturi to make his second son the emperor after he dies.
Oh.
And that second son is Daisetsu, who in the old storyline was Daigotsu.
No kidding.
Yeah, because Daisetsu, like, it turns out was like everyone thought he was dead, but it turns out he was rescued by like Shadowlands people and raised there, and then he came back as the leader of the Shadowlands long after Fu Lang died.
Right.
But because he's much more like balanced and centered, and because he didn't go to the Shadowlands yet, or may never. But I believe the Emperor just died, and I think somehow the first son ended up Emperor anyway. I need to catch up on a little of the fiction. So
how are you enjoying it though?
I'm enjoying it. The game is better, I think.
Mechanically overall?
Yeah. Mechanically, it is a better game. There's rarely like just a full stomp. Like in the old game, you could get to a point where you just utterly stomped someone, and that was just a relatively consistent thing sometimes.
Well, there was also the massive stalemate where you both just built up to a point where we're going to have one massive decisive battle, or you're going to honor out, because we're in stalemate.
But there's usually not that as much. Now, there are some decks that can come out real fast and kill you really quickly. If you don't have an answer for that, like you need to build your deck like with an answer for that. But if you have like even just a couple good answers, you can definitely hold that game and come back. In the old game, there were the military victory was the most common, but as you won a military victory, you took away your opponent's resources.
Right.
That doesn't happen in this one.
Law of diminishing returns.
Right.
That way. Yeah.
You still go over and break provinces is what it's called, but they can still bring things into play from those provinces. They just either have to bring it into play that turn if it's broken, or they have to they discard it and get a new card to bring in next turn.
I see.
Whereas with unbroken provinces, you can say, "Oh, I'm going to keep this around and buy it next turn."
Yeah.
So, but nice. Overall, the mechanics allow for more back and forth. There's more strategy involved, just in the base setup of the game before you know whose clan is who and what kind of deck they're playing. Like, there are already things you need to consider for strategy in every single game.
Neat.
That change based on board state. It's very good.
All right. Most of what I've been playing recently has been World of Warcraft.
Nice.
Yeah, a doodle lost interest in Magic.
Oh, that's too bad.
Well, maybe he'll come back to
Yeah.
it later. Yeah, mainly he enjoyed looking at the cards with me, and if he saw a card he'd seen before, he wasn't interested in it.
Yeah.
So
There's eventually a point where you reach the limit of
yes, you do.
new cards. Yeah.
But I've enjoyed playing World of Warcraft again. Mainly I play on a low population server, so I don't see anyone, which is great for the intranet wanderer.
Yeah.
Sorry, the introvert wanderer type.
Introvert internet wanderer.
Yes, and do that because you are online. And I've been enjoying it because I've been playing types of characters that I haven't before from different species. And while there's the reason we started playing again, we reactivated one of our accounts, is because there's a big new patch that's come through, a new expansion. But I don't want to play a level capped character there because it feels like tuning into season 7 of a show.
Right.
In a way, I want to go back to the beginning, so I begin new characters and play through all the new content. And back at the third expansion, Cataclysm, when the world was broken and reshaped, Blizzard rewrote all of the starting level zones and all of the quests.
Oh.
And recently, they've also they've made the leveling more dynamic so that the critters in an area scale with you.
Oh.
To a certain point, which was great because the thing that would always annoy me is being a content-based player and a story-based player. I wanted to knock out all the quests in a zone before I'd move on.
Yeah.
But if you would do that, and depending on your play style, it's a bulldozer effect, kill everything in your path or whatnot. There are some, and they've added so that if you pursue your professions as you go, you get experience for that as well.
Oh, nice.
Is in the old system before the monsters would scale to you, you could level out of an area. And just be whomp-assing on it.
Right.
By the time you're 4, 5, 6 levels above the monsters that you're fighting by the end of the level, so there's no tension there, and it's boring. Now they make it so that if you level, everything else stays within one level of you.
Oh, okay.
What that also means, though, is you can't solo a dungeon the way you used to.
Oh.
You know, as a high-level player, come in, hey, come here, guilty noob, I'll go kill everything.
Right.
You'll level 6 times and get all this awesome gear.
Cool.
Which has been neat. And when creating a character, I've deleted so many characters because a bunch of stuff has to line up for me to make it a pleasant experience. One, I have to like the playstyle of the class.
Right.
And there's some that I just don't care for. I like the warriors. I like go get 'em. I like stand back, manipulate.
Okay.
But I don't like things that take too long, and I don't like just stand and cast. It's boring to me. There's also got to be an aesthetic bit, like some of the characters, like the Draenei and the Tauren, are so big that I can't see over them. And some of them, just like the gnomes and the goblins, are too ridiculous for me. They seem too comedic. Like you can't take it seriously. So if I can find the right class and species and play style, then I have something that I really like.
Okay.
And I have that. And I've constructed it so that I've got 4 characters that I'm playing now. 2 from each faction, 1 on each of the main starting continents. So that way I'm getting all of the I'm getting the Kalimdor Horde, the Kalimdor Alliance, the Eastern Kingdoms Horde, and the Eastern Kingdoms Alliance content.
Okay.
And I'm enjoying it.
Right
It's a
on.
way to burn some evenings
That's kind of cool.
when the kids go to bed. Yeah. All right. Now we will turn the page into our questions.
All right. So our first question is from Silver Griffin. What storylines were the most painful to cut out of a show because they just didn't fit in with the direction you decided to go?
Oh boy. Well, that always happens. Sometimes there are things, like even in Journey Quest, there has been where we've whittled it down considerably. Originally, we thought we'd do 7 seasons, but that was when we thought, oh yeah, we'll do an episode, we'll do a season every year or every 2 years at the most.
Right.
And there are some scenes that had to that I've always thought would be in the series that have just not materialized. And sometimes this happens where you plot stuff out. In the way that I plot stuff out with the note card technique, there are often characters or situations or lines that I think are great and that we'll get to, but the story takes another route or it doesn't allow for that, and it winds up being cut. There was one whole situation from Gamers 3, which Nathan co-wrote, and I
parts of it
together, that where we had a whole 90s montage.
Oh, yeah.
Or a 90s flashback.
Yeah.
This is, of course, was when the 90s was only like 10 years ago. Well, 20.
That was 15.
15 years ago, where it was just full of 90s tropes and stuff, and it didn't fit in with
Yeah.
the rest of the script, and so
I thought it was funny, but it just didn't. Yeah, in the end, it did not.
Sometimes it's
fit.
not. Yeah, it's not a matter of whether it's funny or not.
Yeah.
It's a matter of does it fit with where the show is going.
Yeah, it would have messed with the flow and the pacing, and it just would have seemed like it was forced in there.
Right. So some of the ones that were painful, though, I'd say the one that was the most painful for me is there was a couple of scenes that were cut from season 3 of Journey Quest, and it was the orcs in the Temple of Old Dooms. Because if you remember at the end of season 2, Ren and Rilk break each other's hearts.
Right.
Rilk comes back to Grelnock and Yart, and they're basically saying, "Look, we got a temple to explore." Right. And then the next time we see them, they're outside of Cobalt Springs.
Right.
And they're complaining of, "Oh God, Hume magic," and all that.
Blech.
That was a patch that I had to write because we had cut about 3 scenes from season 3 of the orcs actually in the Temple of Old Dooms, and this time it just came down to budget. It was a matter of, and the thing about the unforgiving, brutal mathematics of film budgeting is cutting a few lines here and there is not going to save you money.
Right.
Cutting a character out of a couple of scenes will save you a little bit of money. The way that you save money is by eliminating a day from the schedule.
Yeah.
Because everything is paid for by the day. Cast, crew, insurance is paid by the day, food, equipment is rented by the day, everything is based on that. And so when we look at it, and it's like, we can afford a 20-day shoot.
Right.
That's how many days you get. I mean, you could be talking $10,000, $15,000 a day sometimes on some shoots. And
for a low budget
film. And so one of the jobs that you have to do, and Tony Becerra is brilliant at this, it's one of the things that makes him the best AD in Seattle, is arranging the schedule so that we can get everything filmed in as few days as possible by maximizing those days, which is why it actually informs screenplay structure. Why do you have a scene heading, an interior, this location? Well, you do all those locations on the same day.
Right.
Because it's the most efficient way to do it. Sometimes you'll have some locations that you can't mix with other locations and fill a day full.
Right.
Or you can't afford another build, and that's what happened with the orcs. Is we had another half day of filming with locations that were not seen otherwise in the show.
Right.
It wasn't happening elsewhere in the dwarven boomtown. It wasn't happening in the woods where we can make anything happen in the woods.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It was this had to be in the Temple of All Dooms, and the scene was Rilk and the orcs coming into the entrance as the employees were looting it.
Oh yeah.
And they run into a custodian guy who's like, "Hey, sorry, we're not hiring right now. Place has been sacked." And like, "What happened here?" Is some psychopath killed the Watcher and bulldozed his way through the temple. So it's basically free for all. Grab what you can. Hey, you guys put that back. That's temple property and whatnot. And there was a scene where, so it's like the Orc Slayer has already been through here. He stomp-assed everyone, and Grelnock and Yart see this, are kind of relieved and they're like, "Oh well, looks like looks like there's nothing to be done. We should probably go back to our lands and hibernate. Hey, you remember Yart's cousin? We can hook you up with her. She's promising." And Rilk asks, "Is there a library?" And so the next scene is this library where Rilk finds the phrase book that he's using in season 3, and is also saying, "Hey, look for spells or something that can help us catch up to the party."
Okay.
And that's where Yart finds the spell. It's like, "Oh yeah, I can brew this with local stuff." Cool. And they find a couple of magic items that let them catch up to there. And it also shows a moment of Rilk actually actively choosing to stretch the parameters of his mission so that he can potentially bump into Ren again.
Okay.
And so that was the one that was the most painful to lose, because it had these wonderful moments with these characters that we care about. And also does another thing that we really like to do in the series, and that is show sort of another side of fantasy that you don't think about. The series and Farther All in general is about making it as familiar as possible so that the differences really stand out.
Yeah.
And that what happens to a temple after it's been sacked, basically. Right? The employees are leaving, they're polishing their resumes, they're getting back. And so that was one that was painful to lose.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, the next one from Raphael. How hard is it to stick to a wait for it, it will all come together at some point narrative when you need funding from people trained to expect immediate gratification in their media consumption? Have you or other Zoe writers taken specific steps to address this?
How hard is it to stick to a wait for it, it will all come together at some point narrative? And this is specifically for when we need funding?
Well, so how
see.
hard is it to keep saying, hey, hang on, it'll all come together at some point, when everyone is expected to say, I paid you money, give me what I want now?
Well, I don't run the Kickstarters, so it's not that difficult for me. I mean, I've run a few of my own for the novels and such.
Right.
Ben is the wizard at this, and has taken specific steps to address this. I know that like the behind the scenes work that happens before one of these Kickstarters launch is just massive and detailed. There's so much communication that's happening with the fans and the backers via the Discord channel, via other media forms of communication as well, to find to get a big splash, because when inevitably what happens when we run one of these campaigns is there's a big segment of the fan base that knows it's happening and pledges. There's another section of the fan base that doesn't know it's happening, and sometimes doesn't know it's happening until near the very end.
Right.
And
or after it's done.
Or after it's done. And that's because, over the course of the show, Facebook has changed its algorithms. Kickstarter's recommendation matrix, there's more people using it now.
Right.
So stuff doesn't necessarily get recommended to the same people. Security and email changes. There was the big change in the European Union as for direct advertising about can you actually email people who've backed this project before without it being considered a solicitation. And so there were workarounds that had to be considered for that. So there's work that's put into creating as much of a day one boom as possible.
Right.
Because I think I was at a convention at PAX with Tony one year when Kickstarter was still pretty new, and the speaker was saying the magic threshold seems to be about 30%. If you can get over 30%, the chances of your project funding just skyrocket.
If you can get over 30% day one.
Not over day one, just over 30%.
Oh, okay.
And it's just mentally of looking at that and people assessing whether it'll make it or not.
Okay.
Definitely we want to get over that in the first day. So we try to make as big a day one splash as possible so that it engages those recommendation algorithms. It says, here's what's trending, here's what's big, here's what's new, and that potentially brings new people in, because if they take the time to read the page and they're not familiar with it, they can go and spend 5 hours catching up on the series and then say, hey, this is cool. So how hard? Wait for it. It will all come together at some point. It's hard. It's hard because you wonder if it's going to work, and you fear that it won't. And we have had some Kickstarters fail.
Yeah.
Hasn't happened in our flagship property yet. So
fingers crossed. Thumbs up. Yeah. So from Moritz, what do we call the world the real life scenes of The Gamers and Hop Jockey are set in?
Earth.
Excellent.
I mean, I don't mean to be glib. I don't really have a name for that.
I mean, it used to be the Hop Jockey universe.
Right.
But then that sort of became the name of the series. I mean, it could still be the Hop Jockey universe, because that encompasses...
That's what I refer to in my internal documents. So we'll call it the Hop Jockey universe.
There you go.
There.
From Red. When you're writing, how often are the characters you create based on a real person you know, and can you give us an example of one such character?
I mean, oftentimes, or I should say previously, I have written sometimes with people in mind for a part, not because I had precast it, but because I needed a stand-in in my mind, and sometimes that behavior shapes the character. But rarely does that survive past the casting process. Specifically, how often does the character, based on a real person you know, can you give an example of so and such a character? Yes, I can. So, the project that you will never see, Rise of Tyrants, the video game I spent 3 years writing as part of Z2 and King, was set in a diesel punk world of sort of 1930s technology, monarchy versus monarchy, in a world where the Pleistocene megafauna had not died out. So you had raptor cavalry and mammoths that would sometimes stampede through a region and whatnot. It was pretty cool. And the story was this region that had been conquered by evil general and his barbarian horde, and you were backing the true prince on his attempt to liberate that front. And so in the cast of characters, you had Prince Reinhard Edelwolf, who was the blonde, sword-wielding, young, naive 22-year-old who believes in a black and white universe paladin. And then there was his attaché, the roguish, charming, cowardly character named Nathan.
Hey, wait a second.
Who was basically the character who would talk to the player. So the player was the captain, right?
Okay.
That was you, and they would speak to you directly. And while the prince was the first guy you saw, he immediately handed things over to his attaché, Nathan, to talk to you. And that's where a lot of the humor in the game came from, was this character was not a militaristic character. This character was a realistic character who would address the ridiculousness of the world directly, and comments like, "Are you the only one noticing that?" Like, they had this bit that was one of my favorite bits was the romantic tension between him and a character named Nora, who was the mayor of the town that you attack and take over.
Oh, okay.
And she comes out. They basically dig her up from a house that they blew up, and she's advocating for her people while completely loopy. And they keep trying to order her to the hospital. Is why would you build the hospital? You send this character in there, but she keeps popping up.
Okay.
And saying things loopy to try to, help you build your little economy, do the stuff that is necessary to the base building, to instruct. And every one of these characters had a specific gameplay feature that they were helping you map out.
Oh, okay.
Right? And there's one point where after the third of these moments with Nora popping up after being sent to the hospital, Nathan just comes in and looks at you and is like, "So are we just letting her walk around with a massive head injury? Because it kind of looks like that's what we're doing." And Nathan's intro was one of my favorites ever. And that was, when you have so little runway as a game like this, like, nobody wants to read a video game unless that's the point. And in mobile, death is in 50% retention on the next day is success.
Okay.
So you want to try to distill as much character into as few lines as possible and just deliver these wonderful moments. And so, right after the tutorial battle where you come in, you storm out, you blow up the town, the evil dictator pledges his revenge.
Yeah.
And who was voiced by Brian Lewis in the commercials.
Oh,
by
cool.
the way. That will never air, which is sad.
Oh.
The prince is like, "Congratulations, Captain. We've taken the town, what's left of it anyway. But now it is time to rebuild and win hearts and minds. Lieutenant Durant." Pod. "Lieutenant," and here comes Nathan with his collar undone, and his first line were, "Are we not looting? I thought we were looting." And the prince sends him to do the stuff, and Nathan was so kept. There was one of my favorite lines, however, is like, "Okay, well, let's trade a barracks to turn people into soldiers, whatnot." And the follow-up line was, "Great, now we can go fight for freedom, victory, freedom, and we'll say justice." And whatnot. I hope I didn't violate my NDA with that. The game's been dead for 3 years.
Yeah, if they're going to go after you for talking about a game that will never see the light of day, then
anyway, the name came from, I named him after you and had you in mind when writing him because he was a lot of fun and he was my favorite character.
Well, except for the cowardly part, thank you.
The number of times where he tried to defect in the middle of the battle. I really miss that game. I mourn for it and I raise a glass to it every now and then. It was a good story.
Well, maybe you can do something similar to it someday.
Maybe.
From Rob. Fantasy or fantasy comedy seems to be your favorite genre in which to write, and I presume Nathan's favorite in which to act. But what is your favorite genre to consume?
Favorite genre to consume? I enjoy long-form speculative fiction with relatable characters. I don't like a lot of stuff that's just set in the here and now. I don't know a better way to say it than mundane, but that has connotations of judgment to it. But it's like I
contemporary.
Contemporary, thank you. The show that I liked the most that had no supernatural or speculative fiction elements in it was Veronica Mars.
Okay.
Teenage girl solves mysteries.
Right.
Which is how Jimmy McMichael said, "You need to watch this show." And then he pitched that, and I went, ugh. He said, no, it's so good. And it turned out to be. The shows that I like involve really interesting world building, that are either historical in nature or futuristic or just not set in the here and now, but that have the problems of the here and now in them, and have characters that are relatable. Because that's one thing I always appreciate is our foibles aren't going away, and they're going to be present in whatever setting or situation we find ourselves.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
How about you?
I think, so my answer's going to sound a little flippant, but I don't mean it that way. And so specifically my favorite genre to consume, which I would also say is my favorite genre in which to act, is the one I'm in. And so, like, I mean, if I find a good book, I don't care if it's fantasy, science fiction, contemporary, whatever. I want to consume that. I want to watch it, whatever it is. If I'm in a play and I think it's a great play, or I'm in a show and I think it's a great show, like, I'm usually just absolutely totally into it if I'm currently enjoying it. I find something to enjoy if there's something to be found. And so, like, I mean, I've had projects I've done where I'm like, I thought I would like this. It's the kind of things I like, and I despise this project. I hate it. None of that has been Zoe stuff. And then I've had other stuff where I was like, this didn't look very interesting to me, but it is awesome. I'm enjoying the crap out of it. So I guess I guess it's hard to say what I prefer to consume, because I just want to consume whatever it is that happens to be capturing my interest, and it's a pretty wide net.
I've seen you at a buffet.
My family has a philosophy at buffets. If they got their money's worth, you failed. And if you don't walk away uncomfortable, you failed.
I don't know a better way to end it than that. There is one more question, but which is I will take care of in the next look under the hood.
Okay.
And I'll address it there because it's not one I can address here.
Okay, right on.
Anyway, this has been pleasant. And wow, we've been going for almost 90 whole minutes.
All right, you guys got an extra long one, which I'm not going to turn into a sex joke.
That was not a good place to end it.
All right.
Let's hope that...
That's a good sex joke.
Let's hope that...